All right, it looks like we're live. Hello, everybody. This is Heather Gray with Discovering Health, and you're on today with Talking Shit with Heather. And today I've got my very first guest ever, Miss Lois Thompson. I'm so excited to have you. How you doing today, Lois?
I'm great. Thanks so much, Heather, for having me on.
Absolutely. So talking shit is two ways of talking shit. One way, I talk with other practitioners, and sometimes we actually talk about literal shit, parasites, bacteria, yeast, gut health, that sort of stuff. And then I've got other folks who I have on, like such as yourself, who is more of an energetic healer. And the talking shit that I really want to kind of dive into is what brought you into your line of work, right? It's it's a little tongue in cheek, obviously. So tongue in cheek. So talking shit, for me, there was a history of childhood trauma, right? There was a history of sexual abuse. There was addiction. There was, all this stuff that has become, it's still in a lot of circles taboo to talk about, right? But it's when we bring that stuff out into the light is when the healing can happen. And so that's really what I'm wanting to do is talk shit, bring that darkness into the light, right? And so that way we can heal it, we can transform it, we can learn from it. And so what's your talking shit story today, Miss Lois? What brought you to the line of work that you do, and what is it that you actually do, and how do you work with folks?
Sure. Well, I couldn't agree with you more about bringing shit to the light and releasing it. So I have a similar story of childhood events, sexual abuse, other kinds of issues that were unheard when I did speak about them to the people that were taking care of me, my parents. And for whatever reason, they couldn't hear it. They didn't do anything about it. And so I did what most people do, is bury it. And what ended up happening were multiple things. One is my physical health took a toll because of being sexually abused, I believe is the root cause of obesity that I struggled with as child, young adult. And I mean, I still have weight challenges, but today. But my first career, I was a respiratory therapist. So I was raised on a farm. I was thought that I was going to be a farmer's wife or a veterinarian because I didn't know anything else. But I took this test in high school and they're like, oh, you should be somewhere in healthcare. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And respiratory therapy showed up for me. And oh my goodness, it was a perfect fit. Because now that I'm looking back, I realize I was doing healing work that I had no idea that that's technically what I was doing, because I look back to how I was guided to communicate with people, especially as a respiratory therapist. Often, if someone is in the dying stages and they need assistance with breathing, you, as a respiratory therapist, you go in and help provide the breath. But I was always led to talk to them. Here's what's going on. We're touching your chest. It's all okay. And I would say my name. And back then I got made fun of because I was a young, very, very young, like 19, 20-year-old doing this. But now that I look back, I believe that not just me, I believe that most everyone who's doing some kind of healing work, you do healing work, even though you don't call yourself a healer because you're healing the gut, right? Is there because they're trying to heal themselves first. And that's the best kind of healer, someone who's actually dug in and done their own thing.
Absolutely.
So as I moved through my life, I absolutely adored respiratory therapy. I ended up getting married, having children. And then what ended up happening was after I gave birth to my third child, my body started attacking itself in an autoimmune kind of way. And it took 18 months multiple doctor's appointments, being told all sorts of things like all moms of three feel this way. This is just stress. You know, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, until they finally came around to a diagnosis of a really rare autoimmune disorder, which I don't really want to name right now, but it mimicked MS. It was not MS, mimicked MS. So we know those kind of symptoms. And I became very sick. And some days I was very, very sick, and some, you know, and it was cyclical, and I never knew when it was going to happen. But long story short, also
Hold on. How did it affect you?
Oh, it affected me. I had a tremendous amount of physical pain. There were times that even clothing hurt. I had 3 children, and I couldn't hold my, you know, and hug my babies. The exhaustion was unbelievable. And at one point, my bladder stopped working, and I ended up having to catheterize myself for a total of 4 years, which means if you don't know what a catheterization is, you have to stick a tube into your bladder to release the urine. And it's not comfortable, we'll put it that way. So at the same time that this was going on, right around the very first part of it, I mentioned about how I buried the emotions. I started having what are called flashbacks, and I had no idea what flashbacks were. All I know is I started having these wide awake nightmares, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was guided away from therapy at the time because I was in a church that didn't believe in therapists unless they were their therapists.
Right.
And so I felt very guilty, but I really felt I was losing myself. So I found a therapist, and we started uncovering those old memories and started dealing with them. And so that's when I became really interested in emotions and memories, but I didn't know anything yet about energy. You know, often we're taught, and we're not well taught as children about emotions unless you have a very progressive parent, let's say that. I mean, if I typically, when I'm working with somebody, I'll say, okay, name all the emotions that you can think of in the next 2 minutes. And we usually get about 5 or 6 in, and they're like, it's common. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with
5 or
them.
6, I think I can name 3.
Right. You know, typically we think of anger, we think of sadness, we think of happiness, you know, and there is such a variety and variations. But what we especially aren't taught is that there are energies attached to those emotions. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. So at any rate, I'm going to fast forward 15 years. I was sick for 15 years. And
while raising 3 young ones.
Yes, and my husband is and was just amazing during that period. So I had help.
I did not have that kind of support raising my kid when I was sicko. So yay for him.
Yeah, he's a gem. He's a gem. So my body had totally shut down. I couldn't keep weight on. I was 103 pounds at about 5'6". I could only either be bedridden or in a wheelchair if for some reason we were going out. And the neurologist who was taking care of this issue was a specialist. There were only 75 people in the US that had been diagnosed with this at that time. My husband on December 6th of 2006 pushed me into the neurologist office, and the neurologist, well, let's say he did not have a personality, because the desk had more personality than this neurologist. I don't know if anyone's had a healthcare provider who, especially when they don't know what to do for you, they just become disconnected.
Yeah.
So he so drolly said, there's nothing more we can do for you. You only have months left to live. Well, guess what? He wasn't wrong. At that moment, he wasn't wrong, because the trajectory that I was on would have meant death. So because I was a respiratory therapist, I kept really good records of everything that was happening to me over those 15 years. And I went back after this whole situation. I had been on over 100 different prescription medications in that 15 years. And at one point I was on 15 different prescriptions.
Just throwing shit at a wall.
49, it really was throwing shit on a wall and saw what sticks. But here's what happened. I had no idea what it was mystical in some way. And it almost seems impossible to believe, but I know that this happened. As he said that, I heard a voice that said, "You're not done yet." What? What was that? I still can't name it. Was it my higher self? Was it spirit? Was it God? I don't know, but I heard that. And it astounded me and also scared me. And because I thought, now I'm hearing voices, great.
Another prescription, please.
Not only am I going to die, now I'm hearing voices. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, I grieved that my kids were still, my oldest was maybe 16 at the time, and my other, younger. So where do you go from there? So I had a lot of really miraculous things line up. Many of us might call it serendipity. Sometimes you'll just call it luck. But I had a friend who lived nearby who also had a disease, and she had been going to a naturopathic physician here in Erie. Now, remember, I was a respiratory therapist. I was all about the medical model. I believed, I gave my power away because I didn't question anything. Doctor said, "You need this." I said, "Okay, let's try it." Because I didn't know better. My friend said, I went and saw this person, and would you go? Now, because you've already, referenced and called this talking shit with Heather, I think I can use this word. At that point, I was so desperate, I would have drank monkey piss if it would have done something for me, right? And I think, Heather, you probably see clients like that as well, desperate for something outside of the medical model, right?
Absolutely. If you told me to jump, I said, how high? Like I would have, same thing. A lot of the stuff I remember taking back then, it tasted horrible or jacked up side effects, but I would continue to take it because I was desperate and I just needed something to have hope.
Right. Well, what ended up happening is I went to this naturopathic physician, and she did her thing. But I think what I really had happen is I took my power back that day. If this doctor wasn't going to help me and I was going to die anyways, what can I do to make it different? And so I began on the holistic pathway. Now, what I want to make sure is that we do a really good definition of what holistic is. Holistic doesn't mean alternative, and it doesn't, or complementary. I don't care for the word alternative. I prefer complementary. It goes along with holistic. The definition is more about seeing the whole person,
right?
And not just not medical. I think that we have, media has turned it into, if it's holistic, it means that it's not as good as, or something along that line, especially coming from the medical community like I did. So this naturopathic physician saw me as a whole person. It wasn't just about what my body was doing, what was going on in my mind. I was unpacking having been sexually abused. And that in and of itself, once I started unpacking that through different holistic methods, acupuncture, acupressure, qigong, and it continued with therapy. I like the idea that if you are on a holistic pathway, it's both and. We're
Right.
not saying you can't, see a physician. It happened this week. I had a little ankle injury this week. I fell down some steps. The first thing I did was go to a doctor to get an x-ray, right? Because that's medical. I'm not going to put on some essential oils or, check my acupressure points. I mean, I will to heal it, but I needed. So
Absolutely.
I really feel it's important to, it's not either or, it's
Absolutely.
both and. So where are we going with this?
A little more into the modality that you have found. You at the
Sure.
beginning, I said you do energy work. I'd love to hear more about
Yeah.
that and how you work with
So I just have to touch one more base of hearing the voice. My I've become very familiar with this voice, by the way, and I do believe it's higher self or spirit. And I heard a voice, I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it was 5 years after being told I wasn't going to be here anymore. And it said, you're going to open a business. And I thought, what? A business? But at that point, I had what's called quantum touch training. You might know it as healing hands. And some people, it's not the same as Reiki. You might know the word Reiki. But I trusted in that voice because I believed then that it knew what was best for me. And so my business is all about emotions and energy. So I'd like to talk about how our emotions have their own frequencies. Heather, I want you to think about someone who is really, really happy, like joyously happy, not fake happy, and it's momentary. We can't be in that state all the time, but think about that. What does it feel like? What kind of action do you see around them?
I see people who are drawn to them. There's like a light around them.
Yes. Yeah. They feel like sunshine, right? They feel just light and bubbly, and there's a lot of movement usually with them, right? But then when we think about the opposite, think about someone who is full of shame and full of guilt. What do we feel around them?
Uncomfortableness, awkwardness. For me, it's a sense of wanting to draw clear because I'm the empath, but also at the sense that I want to stay away because I'm the empath and there's something going on there that I, that don't necessarily want to touch. Like, I feel like I want to help you, but
Sure. Well, guilt and shame are really low vibrating frequencies. There's a frequency to every emotion. Joy is a high vibrating, and it's very fast and very small particles. And guilt and shame are very large particles, very heavy. And you might notice that people are tending to close down, be a little heavier. It feels like you're walking through mud around them a little bit.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So when I work with somebody, especially with the energy modality, because I am a certified life coach, as well as an energy healing practitioner, what is really beneficial is the combination of the two. So a lot of people have heard about life coaching, and it's more goal oriented and helping turn your thoughts around and moving forward. But coupling that with the emotion code, which is identifying and releasing these emotions that are energy, to whatever has happened to us in the past will always be part of our story, but it doesn't have to be part of our life now and in the future.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be in the driver's seat. You can go sit in the back.
That's right. I like that. I like that. So people will meet with me either in person or again on Zoom here. Zoom is also very beneficial. And the way that emotion code works and the way that we begin learning more about our energy and our emotions is through muscle testing. So, do you use muscle testing, Heather, in your work?
Very little. I do mostly labs. I wish I was better at muscle testing. I wish I was a little bit more fluent at that. I have a pendulum that I will douse with, but yeah.
Sure. Well, there's lots of different ways to get answers that are outside of, traditional ways, but it doesn't make them any less beneficial. In fact, I believe they to be very beneficial. So,
Yeah.
muscle testing, if your audience isn't aware, who else would muscle test? Maybe a chiropractor, maybe a nutritionist, an energy healing practitioner. It's the idea that we're able to get past the conscious mind and into the subconscious mind. And that's where all of these emotions as energy are stored, kind of like your hard drive on your computer. The big, we're hearing now out there all the time, oh, you triggered me, right? That's so common to hear, but people use it kind of like regular vocabulary, but we really can be energetically and emotionally triggered without knowing it because of these emotions that sit in our subconscious. How it works, we have our own emotions. There are absorbed emotions. That's what you're talking about, being an empath. There are projected emotions. We all know about people who project emotions onto us, telling us that we're the bad person when they're the ones obviously dealing with it. We have prenatal emotions. While we're in our mother's womb, our moms had emotions. Who knew? But it may not have anything to do with the baby itself. And we also have inherited emotions, which is fascinating. Have you heard the term epigenetics?
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, we can have changes in our DNA expression from traumas in our familial history.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating, but we carry the emotions then into this life. So if someone has inherited anger, there's typically a continuum. Either they are always angry, like for no reason, they have no idea why, they're just pissed off at the world, or they are so anger averse that they can't deal at all. And what we do is we release the energy of it, of that inherited emotion, and it starts to begin to balance itself out. And so, will they be angry? Sure. When someone cuts them off in public, in traffic, but it doesn't have to be the rage that we might feel, It's really a simple process. We identify it, we bring it to the conscious awareness, we talk about it a little bit, and then we release it through a little bit of energy work.
That's awesome. Can you think of a time of a specific client in general, maybe one of your favorites that came to you and had this and going on, and within this period of time, like what's one of your most favorite stories to tell of
Yeah,
of
sure.
inspiration and hope?
Yeah, sure. I'm thinking of a woman who came to me, and she had been in therapy for I'm trying to remember, I don't want to misrepresent her, but a long time, 20 years on and off kind of thing. And she had just general malaise, couldn't figure it out. No matter what, she had been doctoring, she had been, trying all the things. And lovely woman, and started, first with a conversation. When you work with me, we start with a conversation. What's going on? How, and then what would you like to get out of this? And then we talk about some energetic tools you can use. And we start digging in with this muscle testing. And it can be done over Zoom, like I said, or in person. And we identified emotions that were very much attached to having herself been sexually abused as a child. And as we began releasing them, she was able to touch base with emotions that she hadn't felt. And one of the things we do is establish safety. And some people have, buried their emotions their whole life, don't want to cry, don't want to feel them. But when we're doing this work, it is such a release to let yourself feel. And we had around 3 sessions, if I'm remembering right. And she stated to me she got more out of 1 session than in 20 years of therapy,
That's
and
awesome.
more out of 3 sessions than she's had with everything combined. And she literally walked away, restarted her life, and is really doing well.
That's incredible. I tell people that all the time in my own practice. Like, look at toddlers, right? Like, toddlers have got, if they've been raised still healthy to feel, to be okay to feel, right?
Mhm.
Someone takes their toy, they get pissed off, they have a temper tantrum meltdown, they feel all their feelings, and then within 2 minutes later, they're back to playing with that friend again, like nothing ever happened.
Absolutely.
That's where as adults that we get stuck, is because we shove, can't feel, don't feel, especially women in a professional work environment. Like, I had so many sales jobs where something, my boss or something, would sting, and not feeling it in the moment because afraid of like losing my job, or
Sure.
being the only girl on the sales team, right? I had to put up and had to be one of the guys, right? And I couldn't show my feelings, because then that showed weakness. So for the longest time, I ran so much masculine energy and completely was not in touch with my emotions in any way, shape, or form. And then it felt like all I did when I started doing a lot of this work was I felt like I cried for like 3 freaking years straight. Like, I was at one point, I'm like, when does it stop? And they're like, well, how long have you been shoving these feelings? I'm like 20 years, 30 years. And they're like, well, you're not going to cry for 20 years, but you definitely, there's still a little bit more of that bottom of the well that you got to feel before you can move on. But it has been absolutely amazing. I'm not as reactive, especially on the road, because the road was what got me the worst. I was over the road
Right.
too, right? So when you put
Right.
700 miles on your car every week in I-25 traffic, like, that's maddening. And so it was like a ticking time bomb, right? This person who wasn't feeling her feelings, and then you put her on a highway 24/7. Like, my kid at times was like literally like deathly afraid to travel with me. And thank God I've gotten that under control. I don't have those issues anymore.
Oh, that's
But
good.
yeah, there's definitely magic in feeling those feelings.
Well, and it can help the physical condition as well. Just, the woman who I spoke about had malaise, right? And the doctors are like, well, you're probably depressed, blah, 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 blah. Not that she wasn't depressed, but she carried so much heavy energetic energy
Mm.
because of what we tapped into and discovered. And she had the memories just flood back. It takes a lot of energy to keep the floodgates closed.
Mm.
And once we open them up, we free up. The potential is amazing because we free up all the energy that we were jamming stuff down. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to, if you work with me, all of a sudden you're going to be crying all the time. That's not what it means, but it also means that, um, you know, again, it's the holistic, part of this. Yes, it's the emotional part, but you're also going to be asked things like, how much water are you drinking? What are you consuming? And I know you deal with the food, but what kind of media are you consuming? What are you reading? What are you watching? How much are you reading and watching and scrolling? How much are you moving? Are you getting outside? And
What's your sleep like?
oh, definitely. And another big piece of working with me is energetic hygiene. You mentioned being an empath. Well, some people have no idea that there's things you can do about that. There's shielding, there's, certain things that you can do to clear yourself. And so there's also the ability to work with me with that.
Ooh, so can you give us a little example? Can you show us one little nugget of like, what can an empath do to kind of help protect themselves?
Yeah, sure. So the shielding that I teach is much more comprehensive than this. But if you want to start shielding, the idea is that you make sure you ground yourself. So this isn't in the moment of you're having an argument with your husband and you're like, you don't want to feel him anymore. So you just all of a sudden just like put your bubble up. Doesn't work that way.
Shut
This is,
down.
yeah. This is, do some deep breathing. Maybe you've meditated, those kind of things. But you sense or feel, imagine in your mind's eye, whatever you want to do, a golden bubble coming up from the earth underneath your feet and encapsulating you inside. Now, if you're old enough, I'm not sure, who your audience is, they'll remember Glinda the Good Witch in, in The Wizard of Oz. She came in on a bubble, right? Put your Glinda the Good Witch bubble on. And then you tell the bubble what you want it to do. And that's called programming it. And we want everything that's on the inside to get out because we don't want to stew in our own juices. And we want anything that doesn't feel great to stop outside the bubble and drop down into the earth. And love always gets through both ways. That is the simplest way to shield yourself, because then we're giving ourselves space to feel our own things. We're pushing. How many have you walked into a room or even like a shopping center and it's like, I can't breathe, there's just too much here, right? Well, if we have our own bubble, it's our own personal space capsule, right? So we aren't feeling just that thickness anymore. We're not constantly getting pinged with who's feeling what, who's feeling what.
Who's sucking all the air out of the room?
So that's just one simple way, is imagining that, golden bubble coming up and around, and then telling the bubble what you want it to do.
I love it. Glinda the Good Witch bubble. I love it. I love it. I love it. And yet when I was asking about tell your favorite story, I mean, you are your favorite story. Like that's some pretty huge, heavy stuff right there. Freaking being told that you don't have much time to live and you've got these kids, like,
Right.
That's wow. That's impressive. And now look at you now. Do you have grandchildren?
No, my children are all grown, and none of them have chosen the child path yet. So, or if they do, but no, I'm full time in my business. The pandemic has, modified a few things, but still partnering and going on. I love doing what I do because I know the value of it. And I would say a small amount of people come to me in desperation. I would say a good majority of the people are, really hurting. I do have some people who just see me on a regular basis for maintenance, right?
Absolutely.
So, there's so much magic, but not in a woo-woo kind of way. There's science behind all of this. And once we tap into this energy component of ourselves, so many things make sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us how. I'm going to have you, I'll put all the links and stuff in the copy as well, but tell us how someone can get a hold of you, where they can find you.
Sure. My website is quantumbalanceerie.com. And I offer to anyone a free 20-minute Zoom consultation where we can talk about what's up with you, and also if what you're looking for and what I offer match. And then I offer package deals where working with me in sets of 3 or 6 give you a little bit more financial benefit. And most people work with me only 6 times at the most. 3 to 6 times, and there's great benefit. And I've heard it again and again, just how much, benefit people receive in just a few times being with me.
Oh, absolutely. And I might have to give you a holler, because when you said the word maintenance, that's something, I'm always doing, big work all the time, but there's always a maintenance component that if I get too far out there, especially energetically, I used to do a lot of body work and a lot of Reiki and stuff like that. And that would kind of help keep me grounded and help keep me centered. But this world is so crazy anymore these days. And it's, and the type of the folks that I work with have been so sick for so long that, I really have to be on guard when it comes to taking care of myself. I just got COVID a couple of weeks ago, and I've been still fighting it. And it's, But I knew I was letting myself get too stressed out. I hadn't been doing a lot of the self-care that I should be doing to do this maintenance, right? To continue to give to my clients the way I need to. And so, yeah, the maintenance piece, that's fascinating to me. So I look forward to giving you a holler and learning a little bit more about how that's going to work.
Great. I look forward to working with you.
Lois, thank you again. My first ever podcast client, talk show guest here. You did absolutely amazing. Like, I had no idea, because when we had spoken just a little bit before on our, getting to know each other, I knew you had a story within you, but when you went in deeper, I had no idea that was there. That was just incredible. And I too actually moved to Colorado to become a veterinary student. So love the animal connection in there too. Do you have any pets?
Oh, I have, my husband and I have one calico cat. She is quite elderly. She's 18.
Oh, wow.
And she's a healer cat. I mean, she knows when, things are off. She wants to be with me all the time. I'm surprised she didn't show up for the show here.
I know, my calico didn't show up either.
So, yeah. Yeah, and my husband and I will be married 39 years next week.
Whoa,
And
congratulations.
so, thank you.
Holy cow.
Yeah, learning how to, navigate a marriage too, like it's all about learning about ourselves, learning our emotional intelligence, learning how our energies mix and match and pound off of each other sometimes. But I just appreciate the ability to help people who feel that there's nowhere to go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lois. I really appreciate the time you've given us today. And I sure hope that anybody who's listening to this really gets the full understanding of like what it is that you can do for them and just what an awesome healer you are.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Have a great rest of you guys' day.
Thank you.
Oops.